1976 seemed to be the end of a long journey for George Wallace. But there was one transformation left, one built from the suffering of a broken body, from a rediscovered religious faith, from reflection upon a life.
George Wallace's life had its ups and downs, but it was pretty down after 76. He's essentially finished as a national candidate. He leaves the governorship in 1978, and he's a fundraiser for the medical school in Birmingham. But he spends much of his time alone. He's never been very close to his family, and he broods a lot. And he begins to think about his life. I think the way all good Southern evangelicals do. I'm at the end of my life now. What have I accomplished? What have I done? What have I done right? What have I done wrong?
If I didn't have what it took to treat a man fair, regardless of his color, then I don't have what it takes to be the governor of your great state. That's what I want to say about that time.
I was out-niggered, and I will never be out-niggered again.
For the feet of tyranny, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
And although Wallace will never admit that he was a hater, he always says he wasn't, he realizes the consequences of his actions in terms of those around him.
And now they've created themselves a Frankenstein monster, and the chickens are coming home to roost all over this country.
His own suffering and the purification that brings and the enlightenment that brings, and his realization that some things he had done and said could have caused others to suffer, bothered him, concerned him as a Christian.
And so one by one, he picks up the telephone and he begins calling his old enemies, people who he had used as kind of punching bags in the 1960s, and asked for their forgiveness.
One of those Wallace called was a civil rights leader who had been beaten bloody by Wallace's state troopers on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in 1965.
He was very candid, very frank, I thought. He literally poured out his soul and heart to me. It was almost like a confession, like I was his priest. He was telling me everything, that he did some things that was wrong and that he was not proud of. He kept saying to me, John, I don't hate anybody. I don't hate anybody.
In 1982, Wallace returned to politics, running for governor for the 5th time.
Fellas, glad to see y'all here. Hey, boys. Glad to see you. Hey, sweetie.
Somehow, Wallace's pleas for forgiveness had struck a chord.
And whether or not you've agreed with me in everything that I used to do and agreed to, I know that you do not. I, too, see the mistakes that all of us made in years past. You know that. Glad to see you here.
You know, God said you must repent. And he's repentant. Governor Wallace is a child of God now. You can believe that. He helped everybody, and especially the black and the poor.
Good to see you. Thank you all very much.
Here's George Wallace from a wheelchair running in 82. The guy wins with the black vote. He could not have won without it.
He wanted the black votes, and he went out and campaigned for those votes. He made promises, And a lot of black folks went out and voted for him, and they supported him.
It said that he was wrong on segregation, I mistreated folk, and I want a chance to repent. But the burden of proof now is on him, and of course only time will tell.
For the next 4 years, Wallace kept his promises, appointing a record number of black Alabamians and depending on a coalition of blacks and whites for legislative support.
He had meetings in this very building, in the governor's office, among black leaders, and sought to build bridges. And if he was the epitome of resistance, he became the epitome of change in the New South.
In a very strange sense, he was somewhat reverting back to the old Wallace. Maybe, just maybe, to his true self.
Governor George Wallace, we love him.
I don't think George changed later on in his life. I think he went back to the George Wallace that I used to know. He really was for the downtrodden. He really wanted to help the people that needed help. And he more or less dropped back into the old pattern of the real George Wallace.
His health had deteriorated some during that term, and I don't believe he believed he could give a full measure of himself had he run again. He actually had 2 speeches with him as he went to the Capitol, and no one knew which one he planned to give. One was that he would seek the office again, one was he would retire.
I would like to be part of the future myself. During the past few days, I have done much evaluation and much soul searching. And some of you younger may not realize that I paid a pretty high price in 1972. Those 5 bullets gave me a thorn in the flesh as it did the Apostle Paul. And I prayed that they should be removed, but they were not. I realized in my own mind that all I'm doing very good at the present time. As I grow older, the effects of my problem may become more noticeable. I feel that I must say that I've climbed my last political mountain, but there's still some personal hills I must climb. But for now, I must pass the rope and the pick to another climber and say, climb on to high heights, climb on till you reach the very peak. Then look back and wave at me. I, too, will still be climbing. My fellow Alabamians, I bid you a fond and affectionate farewell. You're very kind. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Well, anything good out of the Wallace years? I'm afraid I can't think of a single thing.
Much that has transpired in government and on the federal level in recent years was what Wallace had espoused, not on so much on race. That's seen people focus on that, but he was against big government. He was for a strong military. He was concerned about welfare abuse, and that's what we're talking about now.
He has never gotten credit for being the figure he was and having the influence he did upon subsequent politics, Nixon and Agnew, the Reagan movement, frankly, the Buchanan movement, the Perot movement, and the others.
He's the man who's not visible. He's the invisible founding father in this whole process. The very people who profited from Wallace's ideas are the people who don't want to recognize him. He's simply not respectable.
I have no problem forgiving George Wallace. I will not forget George Wallace because we must deal with the reality of Wallace. How is it that a demagogue insulting 20 million black people daily on the television can rise to the heights that Wallace did? Forgive, yes. Forget, never.
The man I see is not the man that many people see when they think of George Wallace. I see a man who has walked with his Lord, and his faith and his forgiveness of the man who shot him 5 times, and his expression of love for that man. And I truly believe the greatest story of him has to do with that personal side rather than anything political.
I think in this conversion of Wallace, he's cramming for final exams. He knows death is not too far away, and he wants to be on the right side, and I wish him the best. I feel sorry for him. To see this dynamic, energetic man just be a pathetic, deaf, almost blind, paralyzed, and in constant pain, I don't want that. I don't wish that on anyone.
The things that he have gone through, it was enough to change him. And I do believe he has changed.
There's more about George Wallace and the political landscape of the 1960s and 70s on the web. The American Experience Online at pbs.org. America Online keyword PBS. The American Experience is made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. And by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation to enhance public understanding of the role of technology. The foundation also supports the Sloan Technology Series, a collection of books chronicling the major technologies of the 20th century.
Liberty Mutual Insurance is a proud supporter of the American Experience. And by helping people live safer, more secure lives, we're also proud supporters of the American dream.
At the Scotts Company, we help make gardens more beautiful, lawns greener, trees taller. If there's a better business to be in, please let us know.
Funding for this program is made possible by a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities and by the following.